Imagine it's December 1944. You're shivering in a foxhole in the Ardennes forest. The temperature is 0 degrees. You haven't slept in 30 hours. Your fingers are so numb you can barely pull the trigger of your rifle. But right now, you aren't thinking about the enemy. You aren't thinking about strategy. You are thinking about one thing only: food. Across the front lines, just a few hundred yards away, a German soldier is thinking exactly the same thing. But what is in your backpack versus what is in his backpack tells the entire story of the Second World War. While the generals moved pins on a map, the war was actually decided by logistics. It was decided by calories, proteins, and the ability to get a hot meal to a freezing man in the middle of nowhere. Today, we are opening the tin cans and the cardboard boxes of history. We are going to compare the rations of the US Army against the Wehrmacht to find out who really ate better and why food ultimately won the war. Let's start with the American GI. If you were an American soldier in World War II, your lifeline was the famous K-Ration. It was designed to be light, durable, and packed with calories. But ask any veteran about it, and they probably won't smile. The K-Ration came in 3 units: breakfast, dinner, and supper. The boxes were color-coded, but the soldiers joked that they all tasted like cardboard. Let's look at the breakfast unit. You opened a wax-sealed box. Inside, you found a small tin of meat and eggs. It sounded good on paper, but in reality, it was often a cold, greasy lump. Alongside it, you had biscuits. These weren't soft cookies, they were hardtack, dense enough to crack a tooth if you weren't careful. You also got a fruit bar, instant coffee, sugar, and crucially, 4 cigarettes. That coffee was a game-changer. For the American soldier, a hot cup of coffee in the morning was a taste of home. It was morale in a cup. To make it, you needed heat. But here was the problem: fire attracts snipers. This brings us to a fascinating difference in technology. The American soldier often had to improvise. They would sometimes burn a chunk of C4 plastic explosive to heat their coffee. C4 burns hot and fast without exploding if you don't use a detonator, but the fumes were toxic. It was a dangerous way to get a hot meal. Now compare that to the dinner unit. This was your midday meal. It usually contained a tin of cheese product. This cheese was engineered to withstand extreme heat and cold without spoiling, which meant it didn't really taste like cheese anymore. It tasted like salty rubber. You also got more biscuits, a packet of lemonade powder, and candy. But there is one item in the American pack that deserves its own story: the chocolate, specifically the D-ration. You might think getting chocolate in a war zone is a luxury, but the US Army made a strange decision. Colonel Paul Logan, who designed the bar, gave Hershey's specific instructions. He said the chocolate must not taste too good. Why? Because if it tasted good, soldiers would eat it as a snack immediately. He wanted it to be an emergency fuel only. So, Hershey's created a bar made of oat flour, cacao fat, and sugar that was hard as a brick. It was heat-resistant up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, so it wouldn't melt in the jungle. The official requirement was that it should taste a little better than a boiled potato. And they succeeded. Soldiers hated it. It was so hard they had to shave slices off with a knife. It caused stomach pains. But it kept you alive when you were cut off from supply lines. Finally, the supper unit. This was the one soldiers dreaded the most. It often contained a tin of pork luncheon meat. It was salty, fatty, and had a texture that many soldiers found revolting. But it was calorie-dense. The genius of the American ration wasn't the taste. It was the availability. The US industrial machine produced these by the billions. An American soldier might hate his Spam, but he rarely went hungry. He had chewing gum, he had toilet paper in every pack, he had matches. Now, let's cross the battlefield and look at the German soldier. In the early years of the war, during the Blitzkrieg of 1939 and 1940, the German soldier actually ate very well. The Wehrmacht understood that a soldier marches on his stomach. They focused on fresh food prepared by field kitchens, or Gulaschkanone, the goulash cannons, as the soldiers called them. The standard German iron ration, meant for emergencies, was different from the American approach. It consisted of a hard biscuit called Zwieback and a tin of meat, usually Fleischkonserve. This was actual meat, often higher quality than the American mystery pork. But the real treasure in the German pack was the bread. Dark, heavy rye bread. The Germans baked it in massive field bakeries just behind the front lines. To a German soldier, bread was sacred. It was dense, sour, and filling. They would carry it in a canvas bag, slicing off chunks with their bayonets. However, as the war dragged on, the quality collapsed. By 1944, that bread was being stretched with fillers. They used sawdust or potatoes to bulk it up. It became known as Kommissbrot, and it was often mouldy by the time it reached the front. Let's talk about the luxury items. While the Americans had instant coffee, the Germans had Ersatz coffee. Real coffee beans were impossible to get in Germany due to the naval blockade. So, they made coffee out of roasted acorns, barley, and chicory. It was black, hot, and bitter, but it had zero caffeine. Imagine fighting for days without sleep, and your coffee doesn't even wake you up. But the Germans had a solution for heating their food that was far superior to the Americans. Every German soldier carried a small foldable stove called an Esbit stove. It used small tablets of solid fuel made of hexamine. It burned without smoke and without a bright flame. This meant a German soldier could heat his soup or his ersatz coffee right in the trench without alerting American snipers. It was a small piece of engineering that made life much more bearable. And then there were the vices, alcohol and tobacco. In the American rations, alcohol was strictly forbidden. The US Army was dry. If a GI wanted a drink, he had to steal it, buy it, or capture it. But cigarettes? They were everywhere. Cigarettes were the currency of the war. A pack of Lucky Strikes could buy you a fresh egg from a French farmer, or even a captured Luger pistol from a buddy. The German army took a different approach to alcohol. They believed a shot of schnapps gave a soldier courage. It was regularly issued before big attacks. But their tobacco was terrible. German cigarettes were often made of low-quality Balkan tobacco, sometimes mixed with dried leaves. That is why, whenever Germans captured Americans, the first thing they looked for wasn't intelligence maps. It was American cigarettes. The Germans also had one secret weapon in their rations, Scho-ka-kola. This was a special chocolate packed in a round tin. It wasn't just candy. It was laced with caffeine and cola nut extract. It was essentially an energy drug in chocolate form. Pilots and tank crews loved it because it kept them alert during long missions. There was also a darker side to German energy. We know now that millions of tablets of Pervitin, an early form of methamphetamine, were distributed to soldiers to keep them awake for days during the invasions of France and Russia. They were fighting on chemical fuel, not just calories. The biggest difference between the two armies, however, was consistency. The American ration was boring, industrial, and repetitive. You ate the same processed cheese and Spam, whether you were in the jungles of the Pacific or the snow of Belgium. But it was always there. The supply line from Detroit to the front line was unbreakable. For the German soldier, food was a gamble. If you were lucky, you looted French wine and sausages. If you were unlucky, specifically on the Eastern Front, you were starving. Logistics in Russia failed completely. German soldiers were often forced to eat local horses that had died in the cold. There are diaries from Stalingrad describing soldiers boiling leather belts to make soup, just to feel something warm in their stomachs. While the American GI was complaining that his chocolate bar wasn't sweet enough, the German soldier was often boiling snow for water and eating stale crusts of bread. There is a famous story that sums up this difference perfectly. During the Battle of the Bulge, German soldiers overran an American position. They were hungry, tired, and desperate. They found mail from home. They found fresh socks. One German commander wrote in his diary that when he saw the abundance of the American supplies, he knew the war was lost. He realized that they weren't just fighting an army, they were fighting an industrial giant that could ship chocolate cake across the ocean, while Germany couldn't even get bread to its own border. So, who ate better? Culinary speaking, early in the war, the German field kitchens probably tasted better. It was traditional, hearty food made with real ingredients. Better means reliable. The US K-Ration was a triumph of engineering. The German ration was a reflection of their war effort. High quality at the start, but completely unsustainable in the long run. As the blockade tightened, the German soldier got thinner. The American soldier, fueled by the endless production of the home front, kept marching. In the end, the history of World War II rations teaches us a vital lesson. Bravery matters. Strategy matters. But you cannot win a war if your soldiers are running on empty stomachs. The unappetizing, mass-produced American spam might have been the butt of every joke in 1944, but it was undoubtedly the fuel that powered the victory. What do you think? Would you rather survive on the reliable but tasteless American K-Ration, or take your chances with the German field kitchen? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to know more about the strange drugs used to keep these soldiers awake, click on the video appearing on your screen right now. I'll see you there.